One thing I've always tried to make clear when I talk about my story is, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have the opportunities. I wouldn't know Jesus had it not been for the relationship that my mom and dad had with the Lord. Had they not found Jesus at an early age and brought me up in church, I wouldn't have known about this God that loved me so much that He sent His Son to die on the cross for me. And even though for a number of years in my life I ran as hard and as fast as I could from the Lord, He was running faster. And so I like to thank them every night. But also I like to offer a word of encouragement to anybody out there tonight that may be struggling. Because I can look out just about every night and I can see a room full of people that wouldn't be sitting there either had it not been for mom and daddy or grandma and grandpa or aunt and uncle that prayed for you. So maybe you got somebody in your life right now that's struggling, that's going through something that you prayed they would never have to deal with. And just keep trusting God. Keep believing in His plans. And He has a plan for each and every one of us. And I thought tonight I would kind of share a little bit about my story, maybe a little bit about my mom and dad, and what I put them through for a number of years. But just how they stood on their faith and they trusted God. Even when I know there were days that they wanted to give up and walk away. But they still trusted and they still believed that He had a plan for everything. And so thought I'd share a little bit about them. My dad, he owned a construction company. And so I grew up as a kid working on a job site. From the time I was about 10 or 11 years old, I would tag along. And when I turned 19, I worked for him for almost 15 years full time. And we got to share a lot of stories and do a lot of life together. From the time I was about 18, 19 to 32 years old, I was living a pretty reckless life. I was living a life that my parents hadn't raised me to live. Like I said, I was running from, at the time I didn't know, but now I know it was a calling on my life. And my dad, we used to sit down and take breaks on the job site. And like I said earlier, he would always tell me whenever I was going through something, he would say, I don't have anything that can fix this. I don't have any answer for it other than Jesus. He said, you wouldn't be here today had it not been for Jesus. Me and your mother would have never made it. He said, when I was in my early 20s, he said, I was living the exact same lifestyle you were living. And I think as parents, we're always trying to spare our children from making the same mistakes that we've made. But unfortunately, a lot of it's just a cycle. And the bad thing is the devil knows how to attack us through our generations. He knows the things that my grandfather struggled with, and the things that his dad, and so on, until that breaks. And so my dad, he said, I don't have an answer for you other than Jesus. He said, I was living the same life that you were living, partying all the time, didn't want to settle down, didn't want to slow down. I met your mother in high school, and we grew up together, and we got married, and she wanted to have a family, and I was still partying all the time. And he said, we ended up separating for like 6 months. He said, while we were separating, I found Jesus, and He brought us back together. He mended our relationship. He said, we made a promise to raise our children in church. And so he said, we decided the best thing to do would be to move away from a small town in Arkansas that they'd grown up in, where all their friends and family were, and just start a new life and get away from everything. So my dad decided he wanted to go to Bible college, and so they moved to Pensacola, Florida. And I'm a Florida boy, y'all. Summer 1978, they had me, and everything started to change. My dad said when we were born, we had you dedicated to this church that we were going to, and we made a promise, to raise you in church and teach you the ways of the Lord. He said, then a few years later, we decided to move back to Arkansas, and we needed some help. I had a sister on the way, and they moved back, and my dad started leading worship at this church. My mom was singing at church, and so I grew up knowing nothing more than church, 3 days a week. And to be honest, I didn't know there was anything other than the holding station until I was in like 8th or 9th grade. I thought that was the only music that existed. Anyway, somewhere along the way, in my high school years, I lost track of all of that. And I know there was a number of years where my parents, wanted to give up because I got in trouble for drug use my senior year of high school. I lost 2 Division I basketball scholarships and dropped out of school my senior year at Christmas break. And man, I thought my life was over at that point. I remember my dad, he was like, well, you can come to work for me. And I was like, well, that's awesome, you know. Everything I've dreamed of, you know, was gone in just a split second. And I wanted to blame everybody else, but I didn't have anybody to blame but myself. But they still loved me through. They still believed in me. They believed God had something bigger. And then moved off to college. I walked into a team. I got a full scholarship. And the day before my freshman year, I tore all the ligaments in my ankle. And I had to redshirt my first year. And my roommate had a guitar. Looked just like this. Sitting in the corner of our apartment. I'll never forget, I picked that guitar up, started dabbling around on it. And I knew the first time I held the guitar in my hand that I wanted to be a songwriter. I wanted to make music. Unfortunately, I thought to play music, you had to party all the time, and you had to have a certain lifestyle and be a certain guy. And so for the next 15 years of my life, I created this other person that I thought I had to live up to be. And I partied night and day for years and just lived as reckless as I could. And somehow my dad still let me come to work. You know, some days he sent me home, but he gave me a job and I took it for granted. But he was always there to love me through it. My mom, my dad. I used to play these shows, and my parents, they would come sit for hours while I just got wrecked on stage every night, just so they could make sure that I was going to make it home okay. In 2012, I was getting ready to leave for Europe for the summer. My wife was pregnant with her daughter. She said, we can't do this anymore, you know, if you can't make some changes, we're out of here, you know, I'm not going to watch you kill yourself. I knew I couldn't do that on my own, but I was ready to change, and I just remember just leaving for tour. And I said, God, if you're real, prove it. If you can prove it, I'll walk away from all of this. A week into that tour, we were driving across Spain one day, 8 hours in the van. This kid was driving our bus. He started scanning a radio station, and I hear a song by Big Daddy Weed come across the radio. And I knew immediately that it was a Christian song. I heard just enough of it before the rest of my bandmates asked to turn the channel. And I went to my hotel room, I looked this song up, and I listened to his lyrics, and I just realized in that moment, man, God sees me in a way, He sees all of us in a way that we'll never see ourselves, you know? And I was like, man, I missed it this whole time. You know, I had this completely other idea of who I thought God was. I thought God just sat on His throne all day with His arms crossed, shaking His head at everything I did. And that's how my parents loved me, you know. They loved me like Jesus, and they showed me that unconditional love. And I called my wife. I came home from that tour. I quit my band, canceled my shows. I gave my life to the Lord on the floor of my closet, June 10th, 2012. Remember, my relationship with my family, with my wife, with my children, with my father, my mom, just started changing. You know, all of a sudden here we had things to talk about that we never had to talk about. Me and my dad started talking about music, you know, and now I'm like listening to Christian radio on the job site, and I like it. You know, before I was like, turn that off, but now it's like, man, this is awesome. The next thing I know, I start walking around on the job and I'm pulling my phone out every 5 minutes and I'm writing songs. And I start recording Christian music. And I get invited to start leading worship at a church. And a year later, I helped them launch a campus and became a worship leader. While I was going to this church, I ended up writing a song called Chainbreaker, and I ended up with a record deal. At that time, I was almost 40 years old, and I was like, you don't sign a record deal when you're 40, you know, you're using your time. I just remember me and my dad one day, we sat down on a job site. It was about 100 degrees, and we were sitting in the garage on a stack of sheetrock, sharing lunch. And he said, I got to tell you something I've never told you before. And I was like, okay. He said, you know, I remember when we were living in Florida. He said, I told you, you know, when you were a baby, we had you dedicated at this church we were going to. And I said, yeah. He said, what happened that morning? He said, we were walking down to the front of the church, and you started crying and screaming and making all this noise. He said, the pastor said, man, it sounds like this kid has a strong set of lungs. He's probably going to be a singer one day. And everybody had a laugh. And he said, the pastor got really serious. And he looked at my parents and he said, this child will be a voice for his generation. And I was like, here I am, I'm almost 40 at that time. My dad's in his 60s. We're crying in 100-degree weather, sharing a Mountain Dew and banging sausages. And I was like, Dad, like, why have you never told me this, you know? He said, well, I didn't want to put any pressure on you. He said, but these songs that you're writing, he said, you know, when you came home your freshman year in college and you picked up my guitar and you took it back and you told me you were going to be a songwriter, I kind of laughed because I thought, you don't just pick up a guitar and start playing it. He said, but then I started remembering what that pastor said. And he said, you never showed any interest in music your entire life until you couldn't play basketball anymore. He said, then you came home a year later and you were pretty good. And then you started playing in this band, and then you started living this lifestyle that me and your mother had raised you to live. He said, we used to come, sit in those smoky bars every night and watch you sing. And just pray that God would take this, turn it to good. And so, he said, I'm telling you this because the songs that you're writing now, they have an opportunity to reach people, to change lives in the way that Big Daddy Wee's song changed your life. No pressure. And I don't say that at all to brag or to boast about it, because I'll be honest with you, I still, most days, just don't feel deserving. I get it wrong so much more than I get it right. And I'm learning every day, you know, just like my song, just like Jesus, you know, a little more like Jesus, that's it. And I'll probably be that way until I go to heaven one day. But I just want to tell you guys tonight, God sees you guys in a way that you can't see yourself. And He has a plan for your life. And He's probably already using you for something. But I do know the one thing that used to stop me, even after I gave my life to the Lord, I always felt like I didn't deserve it, or that I didn't have the tools, or I wasn't good enough. And I used to hear this voice, and it kind of prompted me to go do some things, and I kind of shut it off. All God wants to hear you say is yes. And if you say yes to Him, He'll give you everything that you need to go do His work and do His job. And so tonight, I just want to encourage you guys, if you've got something going on in your life, to just believe and trust God. He has a plan for you. This is one of my favorite songs. It's called Plan For Me.